So your brain makes up roughly, 2% of your total body weight. But right now, as you're listening to this, it is greedily demanding over 20% of your daily energy.
Oh, easily. It's an absolute metabolic furnace.
Right. And yet, when we are staring down a massive project or, preparing for a high-stakes board meeting or just trying to absorb complex information, what do we actually do?
We starve it.
Exactly. We expect this high-performance organ to execute like Olympic-level mental gymnastics while we run on a single cup of coffee and sheer panic.
Yeah, I mean, we treat the brain like it operates on magic rather than biology. We completely divorce our cognitive output from our physical input.
Which is exactly why you, the learner, need to be here for today's deep dive. We're looking at a highly targeted, honestly fascinating guide titled Eating Well During Revision.
Such a specific document, but so universally applicable.
Yeah, exactly. Now, structurally, this document was originally designed for Year 11 IGCSE and Year 13 IB boarding school students, kids who are prepping for major life-altering exams.
Right. Massive pressure cooker environment.
Unbelievable pressure. But as we comb through the actual science of what this guide is prescribing, the mission applies to literally anyone doing intense cognitive work.
Absolutely anyone.
This isn't just about teenagers passing history, right? This is about cognitive optimization. It's about proving that intense mental work isn't just a product of your study techniques or your fancy calendar apps.
It's fundamentally about what you are putting on your plate.
Right.
Because the stakes for those boarding school students are incredibly high, which is why the protocol has to be bulletproof. But you are entirely right. Whether you are 18 or 48, the biological hardware is identical.
The machine works the same way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this document zeroes in on the one variable that is so often ignored in favor of, productivity hacks.
Which is
baseline cellular energy.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can even begin to build the perfect plate, we have to establish why food is the bottleneck for deep work in the first place. When we prep for something important, we obsess over the mechanics. We optimize our workspace, we block out our schedules, we download those focus apps that block social media.
Yep, the Pomodoro timers and all that.
Exactly. But intensive mental heavy lifting requires a massive continuous supply of physical fuel. Like, you wouldn't expect a sports car to run on fumes and still win a race.
No, of course not.
So why do we expect our brains to retain complex information when we, skip breakfast?
It's a massive metabolic demand.
Yeah.
And the thing is, we often think of thinking as a passive activity.
Right, because you're just sitting in a chair.
Exactly, you're just sitting there, right?
Yeah.
But on a cellular level, your neurons are firing millions of times a second. They are building new synaptic connections. They're pruning old ones.
Wow.
They are synthesizing neurotransmitters to maintain your concentration levels, support your memory formation, stabilize your mood. I mean, every single one of those microscopic actions requires a unit of energy.
And what happens when that energy just isn't there? Because, we've all felt that specific kind of wall you hit,
Oh, yeah, the afternoon slump.
Yeah, you're staring at your laptop screen, the cursor's just blinking, and suddenly it's like someone just pulled the plug on your brain. Your thoughts feel like they're moving through molasses.
That is literal cognitive shutdown. Your brain doesn't have a massive internal battery pack, right? It relies on a continuous supply of glucose from your bloodstream. So when you disrupt your normal routines, like when you skip breakfast because you're rushing to a meeting, or you eat dinner at midnight because you're cramming, you cut off that supply.
You're just cutting the fuel line.
Exactly. And the immediate biological reality of that isn't just a rumbling stomach. It manifests as a catastrophic drop in performance.
Like, you literally can't focus.
You become irritable, your motivation plummets, and your brain literally fails to store new data because it doesn't have the chemical energy required to lock in those memories.
See, that fundamentally changes how I view that afternoon brain fog. Because the instinct is always to blame ourselves, isn't it?
Oh, 100%.
We think, I'm not focused enough, or I'm losing my edge, or I'm just being lazy. But it isn't a lack of willpower. It's literally a lack of glucose.
What's fascinating here is how the underlying biology of sustained focus relies entirely on an even keel. We're talking about blood sugar.
The ultimate metric.
Right. The ultimate goal of cognitive nutrition is to create a flat, steady line of energy provision. When you skip meals, your blood sugar plummets. Your body panics.
It thinks you're starving.
Yes. So it releases stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline to compensate. That is why you feel jittery and anxious when you're overly hungry. You cannot achieve deep, meaningful focus when your body thinks it is in a survival crisis.
That makes so much sense. So, the foundation of this entire strategy from the guide is 3 structured meals a day, plus smart snacks to bridge the gaps.
Persistent physical fuel.
Right, to prevent that roller coaster of spikes and crashes. But since that steady baseline is absolutely mandatory, we really need to decode exactly which nutrients actually provide that specific, long-lasting energy.
Yeah, we have to get specific.
So let's build the ultimate cognitive plate.
I love that. And that requires breaking down the macronutrients, not just as like foods on a menu, but as biological tools.
Okay, let's start with the baseline fuel. Complex carbohydrates. We're talking about whole grain bread, brown rice, oats, pasta, potatoes.
But the key word there is complex.
Right, because I really want to understand the mechanics here.
Yeah.
We hear the word carbs, and I think a lot of people instantly picture a heavy pasta lunch that leaves them like practically comatose at 2 in the afternoon.
The dreaded carb coma.
Exactly. So why is this specific type of carbohydrate the foundation of cognitive endurance?
Well, think of your metabolism like a fireplace.
Okay.
If you throw a handful of tightly crumpled newspaper into a fire, what happens?
It just flares up instantly.
Right. You get a massive, blinding flash of heat and light, and 30 seconds later, it's completely gone. You're left with nothing but ash.
Yeah.
That is exactly what happens when you eat simple, refined carbohydrates. Your sugary snacks, white bread, pastries, they break down instantly, flood your bloodstream with glucose, spike your insulin, and leave you crashing hard.
Hence the post-lunch slump.
Exactly. But complex carbohydrates, your oats, your brown rice, they are structurally different. They're long, complicated chains of molecules. Digesting them is like throwing a thick, dense oak log onto that same fire.
Oh, I see. It takes a lot more work to burn.
Your body has to work slowly to break those bonds apart, and because of that slow breakdown, you get a continuous, trickling supply of glucose to the brain over hours. It's a slow, steady, continuous burn that keeps your focus sharp all afternoon.
The oak log of productivity. I absolutely love that. So, okay, we have the slow-burning fuel. Next up on the plate is protein.
For sure.
Eggs, chicken, fish, beans, lentils, yogurt, nuts. Now, obviously, protein is essential for overall brain function, but what really stood out to me in the text was how vital it is for breakfast and lunch specifically.
Yes, the timing matters.
And the mechanism seems to be heavily tied to satiety, like making you actually feel full.
Satiety is a massive component of focus. When you consume protein, it triggers the release of specific hormones like peptide YY, which travel directly to your brain and effectively shut down the hunger signals in your hypothalamus.
It basically quiets the primitive part of the brain.
Precisely. If you are physically hungry, your primitive brain is going to prioritize finding food over whatever complex equation or strategy document you are trying to write.
This just distracting you.
Yeah. Protein anchors your meal. It slows down digestion even further, preventing those blood sugar spikes. And it tells your brain, we are fed, we are safe, you have permission to focus entirely on the high-level executive tasks.
Okay, now we really need to talk about fat. And I want to push back here a little, or at least highlight how counterintuitive this feels based on, like, the last 30 years of diet culture.
Though the low-fat craze, it did so much damage.
Right. Society relentlessly demonizes fat. We've been conditioned to look for low-fat labels on literally everything. Yet this protocol explicitly lists healthy fats, avocados, olive oil, seeds, oily fish, as absolutely crucial.
Non-negotiable, really.
The claim is that the brain is made largely of fat. Can you walk us through the actual neuroscience of why we need to be eating these fats for mental clarity?
Yeah, I mean, it is one of the most damaging misconceptions in modern nutrition. If we connect this to the bigger picture, you have to look at the physical architecture of your nervous system.
Okay.
Your brain is roughly 60% fat.
60%.
Yes, but it isn't just sitting there as inert storage like belly fat. It forms something called the myelin sheath.
The myelin sheath.
Yeah. Imagine a copper electrical wire. To ensure the electricity travels quickly and doesn't short out, that wire is wrapped in rubber insulation, right?
Right. Otherwise, the current just bleeds out everywhere.
Exactly. The myelin sheath is the biological equivalent of that rubber insulation. It wraps around the axons of your neurons. It allows electrical impulses to transmit quickly and efficiently across your brain. And that sheath is made almost entirely of lipids.
Fats.
fats.
Wow. Okay, so if complex carbohydrates are the electricity running through the system, the healthy fats are the rubber insulation maintaining the hardware itself.
Exactly. That's a perfect way to put it. When you deprive yourself of healthy omega-3 rich fats, you are essentially degrading the physical infrastructure of your brain. Signal transmission slows down.
So that's why you feel so groggy.
Yeah, that is why a low-fat diet during a period of intense cognitive demand leaves you feeling foggy and slow. You are literally compromising your brain's wiring.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it. Carbs provide the current, fats protect the wires, protein keeps the alarms from going off.
Oh.
And to round out the plate, we have fruits and vegetables. The guide says to aim for a wide variety of colors to secure essential vitamins and minerals.
Which serve as your defense mechanism.
How so?
Well, when you're under the pressure of a major deadline or an intense revision schedule, your body is bathed in stress hormones. That stress actively suppresses your immune system.
Oh, so you're vulnerable.
Highly vulnerable. The micronutrients in varied produce act as the scaffolding to keep your immune system functioning, preventing you from catching a cold the week before your biggest presentation of the year.
Okay, so the cognitive plate is built, but having the perfect breakfast and lunch is really only half the battle. Because the real danger zone isn't the main meals.
No, it's the gaps.
The danger zone is the in-between moments. Those long, grueling hours at the desk where the environment doesn't change, the screen gets blurry, and our best intentions completely fall apart.
The micro decisions that either sustain the mind or completely sabotage it.
Let's start with the most deceptively simple one. Hydration. I feel like everyone intuitively knows they should drink water, and honestly, hearing drink more water can feel a bit patronizing to an adult professional.
It sounds so basic.
It really does. But the reality is we completely underestimate the immediate cognitive penalty of ignoring it. The threshold isn't severe dehydration. The guide says even mild dehydration leads to headaches, reduced concentration, tiredness, and slower thinking.
That word mild is the trap. You don't have to be wandering through a desert to lose your edge. You just have to get so hyper-focused on an email thread that you forget to drink for 3 hours. And the biology of that headache is absolutely fascinating.
Wait, what actually causes it?
So your brain is essentially suspended in cerebrospinal fluid within your skull.
Okay.
When you become dehydrated, even slightly, your overall blood volume decreases, and your brain tissue literally loses water. It can temporarily shrink.
Hold on, your brain literally shrinks.
Yes. It shrinks and actually pulls away from the skull. This triggers pain receptors in the meninges, that's the outer membrane covering the brain. That is the headache.
That is wild.
And concurrently, the decreased blood volume means less oxygen is being delivered to those neurons.
So your brain is literally shrinking and suffocating just enough to ruin your focus. That is terrifying.
It is.
But it makes the simplest solution so much more urgent. Like, keep a water bottle on your desk. It is the lowest effort biological hack available.
But you know, when that mild tiredness creeps in and the headache starts, water is rarely the first thing we reach for.
No, never. We reach for the quick fix, we reach for a snack, and there's a massive divide here between smart snacking and bad snacking in the text.
Massive.
Good options: fruit, yogurt, nuts, toast. Bad options: chocolate, sweets, and highly processed snacks. And it all goes back to the fireplace analogy, right?
The illusion of the quick boost. Throwing paper on the fire. You will feel an incredible rush of energy for about 20 minutes as your blood sugar skyrockets.
No.
But the resulting crash doesn't just return you to your baseline. The massive release of insulin overcorrects, driving your blood sugar lower than it was before you ate the candy.
So you're worse off than when you started.
Exactly. Your ability to process complex information just falls off a cliff.
Which brings us to the elephant in the room. Here's where it gets really interesting. Caffeine.
The favorite crutch.
Coffee, tea, energy drinks. They are the unofficial mascots of corporate crunch time and university libraries everywhere. Now, the protocol acknowledges that in moderation, caffeine increases alertness.
Right, moderation being the key.
But it explicitly warns that excess caffeine causes anxiety, disrupted sleep, and increased heart rate, and ultimately reduced concentration.
Yes.
Now, I have to stop you there, because I survived my college finals on iced coffee and sheer panic. And it worked. I got the grades. Millions of people hit their deadlines thanks to energy drinks.
They do.
So how can we sit here and say caffeine reduces concentration when, for a lot of us, it feels like the ultimate focus drug?
Because it is the ultimate borrowed time. To understand why it reduces concentration in the aggregate, you have to understand how caffeine actually works in the brain. because it does not give you energy.
Wait, what do you mean?
It contains 0 calories, and it has no metabolic fuel whatsoever.
Then why do I feel so energized when I drink, like, a double espresso?
Because caffeine is an impersonator.
Thanks.
Throughout the day, as your neurons fire, they produce a byproduct called adenosine.
Okay.
Adenosine binds to specific receptors in your brain, and as those receptors fill up, you feel increasingly tired. That is your biological cue to sleep.
That makes sense.
Well, caffeine has a nearly identical molecular structure to adenosine. It slips right into those receptors and blocks them.
So my brain is still tired. It just doesn't know it's tired.
Precisely.
Mm.
You're putting a piece of black tape over the check engine light, and while those receptors are blocked, your central nervous system goes into overdrive, releasing adrenaline. That is the jittery, racing heart you feel.
Ah, okay.
But you haven't actually fueled the system. So if you are chugging energy drinks while skipping lunch, you are demanding high-level cognitive output from a brain that has no glucose to fund the operation, while simultaneously flooding it with stress hormones.
That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It is. That combination, high adrenaline and 0 fuel, manifests as pure anxiety. Your thoughts race, you can't hold on to a single idea, and your actual concentration plummets.
The supreme irony. We chug the chemical to help us focus, and the mechanism itself actively destroys our ability to sustain a singular thought.
Exactly. It just makes us very energetically scattered.
Which is why relying on the oat logs, the complex carbohydrates, the steady proteins, the hydration is infinitely more effective than trying to trick your brain with a stimulant.
Long-term, yes. It's the only sustainable way.
So, okay, we've spent weeks, maybe months preparing. We've dialed in our daily macros, we've managed our hydration, we've avoided the caffeine trap. All this biological preparation leads up to the main event.
Game day.
Let's transition to game day. The morning of the IB exam, or, the morning of the massive keynote presentation, the rules seem to change slightly here when the pressure is at its absolute peak.
They do, because your physiological state is completely different on game day.
Right. Now, the golden rule of this protocol is never skip a meal due to nerves. But crucially, it insists that you must choose familiar foods. Porridge with fruit, eggs on toast, a banana. It literally warns the reader, do not try a brand new breakfast on the morning of a major test. Why is familiarity so important?
Because your digestive system and your nervous system are in constant communication via the gut-brain axis. On the morning of a high-stakes event, your sympathetic nervous system is highly activated.
That's your fight or flight response.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When you are in that state, your body literally pulls blood away from your digestive tract to prepare your muscles for action. Digestion is severely compromised.
So that's why your stomach is tied in knots.
Exactly. Introducing a brand new complex food or a heavier meal than you're used to introduces a massive, unpredictable variable into a highly volatile system. You are forcing a compromised digestive tract to work overtime.
That makes total sense.
Familiar foods, however, are predictable. Your body knows exactly what enzymes to produce and how long it takes to process them. They provide stable glucose without triggering gastric distress that will just, distract you when you need to perform.
So what does this all mean? We've talked about macros and myelin sheaths and adenosine receptors, but this leads into the final and perhaps most profound takeaway from this deep dive.
It really is profound.
It explores the link between nutrition and emotional resilience. We usually think of eating well as a physical chore, something we do to fit into our clothes or maintain our heart health. We rarely think of it as psychological armor.
We separate the two completely.
Right, but this protocol explicitly connects irregular eating to increased fatigue, reduced motivation, and a localized loss of confidence.
This raises an important question about how we interpret our own emotions during stressful periods. We view anxiety and self-doubt as purely psychological failings. We think, I am an anxious person, or I am not confident enough to pull this off.
When in reality, you might just be subjecting your brain to a chemical roller coaster.
Yes. When you deprive your brain of consistent physical fuel, you are artificially inducing a state of biological panic. Your body releases cortisol. You feel stressed, irritable, and overwhelmed.
So it's not in your head, it's in your blood.
Exactly. By simply eating a balanced familiar meal, by securing your baseline blood sugar, you are removing a massive layer of unnecessary physiological friction. You are telling your body, we have the resources to handle this threat.
You are literally starving your own confidence when you skip breakfast. That is such a huge paradigm shift.
It is.
It completely changes the narrative from, I'm not smart enough to do this, to, I haven't given my physical hardware the tools to remain calm while I do this.
Food is emotional armor. It dictates the chemical environment in which your thoughts are actually generated.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to quote the final mantra from the guide. It's directed at these year 11 and 13 boarders, but honestly, it belongs on a post-it note on the monitor of every professional listening right now.
I agree.
It says, revise with discipline, eat with purpose, perform with confidence.
Eat with purpose. I love that. It elevates nutrition from a passive necessity, like something you just do when your stomach rumbles, to an active strategic lever you pull to optimize your mind.
It really does. So for you listening right now, remember that whether you are walking into a terrifying exam hall, logging into a massive remote presentation, or just trying to navigate a highly demanding week of deep work, protecting your mind means actively feeding your body. You cannot separate the two.
And I actually want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, one that takes this brain-body connection even further.
Oh.
We've talked extensively about how the food you eat provides glucose to the brain,
Oh.
but there is another layer. The bacteria in your digestive tract, your gut microbiome, is responsible for producing roughly 90% of the serotonin in your body.
Wait, 90%?
90%. And serotonin is the neurotransmitter responsible for regulating your mood, your happiness, and your emotional stability.
Wow.
Therefore, the next time you find yourself aggressively procrastinating, feeling deeply unmotivated, or just, easily irritated by a difficult task, consider this. Your breakfast isn't just fueling your neurons. It is literally feeding the microscopic bacteria that manufacture your emotional resilience.
That is mind-blowing.
Could it be that you don't actually lack willpower? You're just starving the ecosystem that creates your confidence. Reverse engineer your bad moods by looking at your plate.
The ultimate biological life hack. If the engine isn't running right, before you question your ability as a driver, check the quality of the fuel. Thanks for diving deep with us today. Keep eating with purpose, and we will catch you next time.